KTIB Sports Talk. This is your host, William Taylor, and continuing our series on Saints moments from the 60s. On the line with us now, we have a gentleman part of the original Saints team, and not just the original Saints team, but became a native New Orleanian for quite a while, defensive end Jim Garcia. How you doing today, Jim?
Fine, William. How you doing?
All righty. How's everything in the state of Texas?
Well, it's all right, but I sure miss home, which I call Louisiana. I mean, I was there from 1967 to 1990. So, I really consider it home, and I miss all my friends over there. So, hello, everybody.
All righty. Now, of course, you were actually, though, you were born in beautiful Chicago, Illinois, correct?
I am one of the many transplanted Yankees that came down to New Orleans and started eating crawfish and shrimp and couldn't get rid of me.
Well, of course, and I'm sure the weather's a little bit warmer than it is at sometimes in Chicago, huh?
A wee bit,
Well, then, after your, now I take it you were basically raised in Chicago all your young life?
I was born and raised there.
Right, and then you went on to Purdue University, and how was your career up there at that great school in Indiana?
Oh, I really enjoyed it. In fact, it was some of the toughest days in my life. But I was really fortunate. I had some great coaches and great teammates. And it's really something, because in high school, I wasn't much of a high school player. I was big and fast and strong and didn't know much about football. But when I got to Purdue, the coaches really, they were just great. And I ended up being the captain of the team for my senior year, which was really quite an honor.
Who was your head coach at the time?
Jack Mullenkoff was my head coach.
All righty, because I know back in the 50s, I think Hank Stram had worked there as well.
Hey, Hankster's from there. Right.
Right. Now, of course, one thing I read here in your biography, because I actually still have a copy of the very first Saints media guide, is you were also, you had a little postseason success in college, and that you went to the East-West Shrine game as well as the College All-Star game.
Yes, I was really fortunate. Kind of a, I guess you call it trivia story. When I went to the East-West Shrine game, I got to be friends with Butkus. We were both from Chicago, went to rival high schools, and we hung around together for the East-West Shrine game training days. Then we went to the Hula Bowl in Honolulu, and then following that next July, I went to the College All-Star game up in Chicago. So it was really an honor to play in those All-Star games.
I take it, did y'all lose to I guess it would have been y'all played the previous NFL champs?
Yeah, that's right. We were playing the Browns. I think we lost by at least 2 or 3 touchdowns. And it was really odd because I had never played a team, and then after the game, walk across the field and get on their team bus and fly back to Cleveland. So it was really a strange feeling, but it was a great honor because the Browns were the world champions.
Well, before we get into your pro career, it says here, though, of course, you established yourself pretty well in New Orleans after football and the travel agency business, but your college degree was education?
Physical education.
Okay.
I was planning on being a coach and a teacher, and in fact, I really had my heart set on it, and then I ended up getting drafted in the NFL. And, had my coach career, but I traveled around to so many teams, played for 5 teams in 4 years, and all of a sudden learned how to pack suitcases quickly, and I ended up getting into the travel agency business.
Wow. Now, it says though you were chosen in the second round, you were the Browns' first pick of 1965.
And that was the overall 17th pick.
So, and I believe your head coach at the time was Blanton Collier.
Blanton Collier was really a wonderful coach. He was a really subdued, soft-spoken coach. And he was just a wonderful guy. He was really a brain. And I was traded the next year in 1966 to the Giants and played under Allie Sherman, who was really a genius also. So all in all, I've had some real great coaches. Played for George Allen, too.
Okay, and before we get to George Allen, wasn't that 65 team you were a part of wound up going to the NFL championship, right?
Yes. We played against the Green Bay Packers, Jimmy Taylor and Paul Hornung and Buzzy Thurston and Mark Starr and that entire crew. Played them up in Green Bay in January of 1966.
And I take it the weather that day wasn't very conducive.
Oh, the weather was unbelievable. We couldn't get team buses in. They had I think the game started 30 minutes late, and they had a tremendous snowstorm, and the field was just in terrible shape. And typical Green Bay playoff situation. We've all seen it on TV, and that was just one of those typical Green Bay January days.
Now, but I also seem to remember 1965 was, I guess to some people's shock, turned out to be the last year of football for Jim Brown.
I know. Jim was really, he great athlete, great back, but he had this real desire to be an actor, which he did. He left after his 9th year in the NFL. Jim, he could have played 3 or 4 or 5 more years and easily done it, but he ended up being an actor.
Now, also before we go on, I was also reading that you were also taken as in the Denver Broncos by the AFL, right?
That's right. The AFL Denver Broncos drafted me.
Okay, so in '66 you ended up going to the Giants under Ali Sherman, and I guess we can say after having the honor of playing in that championship game, you go to the Giants, who had a decent playoff run, I think, from '57 to '63, and your 1 year there, they only wound up going 1-12-1.
Oh, we had a terrible year. We had so many knee injuries, and it was just a terrible season. And it was really a shame because the Giants organization is just a wonderful organization, wonderful people. And of course, playing in New York City was just really a hoot too, playing in Yankee Stadium. But it was just a terrible season. But I met some wonderful people up there. In fact, I'm still keeping contact with them.
And it says here you wound up in the starting defensive end role when Roosevelt Davis was injured.
That's right. You have some real biography stuff there, William. You really do.
And to finish up, it says that though you wound up getting sidelined near the end, a chip bone in your foot?
Yeah, a bone in my foot and also my right knee. Got it hurt, didn't get it cut on until 1968. So it's 1966, that's when I got my knee hurt the first time.
Now tell us about your brief stay with George Allen and the Rams.
George Allen, well, I was with the Saints in 1967, and then in 1968, I was traded to the Rams in the second week of the preseason. And in fact, Deacon Jones, he was holding out, and then they were trying to find a defensive end that could fill in for him, so they traded for me, which is really an honor. When I got in there, I didn't know Deacon had held out, and he wouldn't sign his contract, and so Coach Allen wanted me and started me for a couple games. Deacon signed his contract, didn't have room to keep me, and wanted me to be in the taxi squad, and I said no, and so I was cut, and the Falcons got me. But it was really an honor playing for the Rams for those 3 or 4 short weeks because playing in the Coliseum, which I had been there before, but playing in the Coliseum was just really an honor to play there at the Los Angeles Rams. So it's really it was really a short career, but I played for 5 teams, and it was really interesting to do that.
Of course, before we get to the Saints, '68 with Atlanta. Now, I had to go through the football encyclopedia to look this up. Wasn't initially Norm Pecker the head coach before Norm Van Brocklin took over?
That's right. He was there 3 or 4 weeks, and then he got fired, and then the Dutchman came in. So it's really they had a real revolving door situation there in Atlanta.
You know, it's funny. I tell people Norm Van Brocklin, such an established quarterback with the Rams and the Eagles, but because of NFL films, the only thing I'll ever remember him for was apparently during the game he got mad at the running back, Harmon Wages, and all he would tell him was, "Harmon, you couldn't even cover me." So.
Yeah, coach is really something, and if he didn't like a situation, he didn't bite his tongue. It was beautiful.
Well, then, of course, that great one-year honeymoon period when you played for the first year of the Saints in '67. Now, I take it, were you picked off the expansion draft list?
Yes, I was. I didn't know why they picked me because I had my knee in a cast. I was up in New York with that injury, and I found out that the Broncos coaches ended up being the Saints coaches. George Dixon and Jack Faulkner, who were with the Broncos, who had drafted me, ended up being on the Saints defensive team, and they picked me. So it was really odd when they picked me. I said, why did they pick me with this cast on my leg? And I ended up getting down there and ended up making a home down in New Orleans, which was the best thing to happen to me. It was the best thing ever to happen to me.
Now, of course, like I said, you come into New Orleans, and what was your first impressions when you got a chance to meet both John Meekum and Tom Fears?
John I liked. He was real friendly. Fears tried to be a real tough guy, and I don't know, he just didn't connect with the players. But Meekum, from what history shows, he was so friendly that some of the players, I think, took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And then of course, you come in, you mentioned just now Jack Faulkner, who really established himself throughout the league as a defensive coordinator. And last I heard, I think he was a scout in California for the Rams organization. George Dixon, of course, on offense. Tell us about one fellow who I liked, who later came back to New Orleans as coach of the arena team we had for a while, Ed Kayat.
Oh, Eddie Kayat was a wonderful person. Eddie was from the Eagles. He was a real tough defensive lineman. And he was a soft-spoken, courteous, but real tough. He put us through some tough practices. And I really liked Eddie. In fact, I didn't even realize it, after a couple of years after I left, found out that his brother, I'm trying to think of his brother's first name, but his brother is the chancellor at Ole Miss.
Oh, Bobby
Kayat.
Mm-hmm.
Right. In fact, he came to practice. I think we were at a game 2 out in Los Angeles. He was out there at one of the games and came to practice a couple times there in New Orleans. But Eddie was just a super guy. And in fact, I think he's back up in Pennsylvania somewhere and works for Special Olympics.
Wow, and of course, I can see it's interesting. People remember him with the Saints and an NFL career before that. He was later head coach of the Eagles, and then wind up really establishing his career as an arena football coach. A couple years ago was with Nashville before they moved. Actually got the championship game under Ed Kayat.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, good for him.
He really adapted to the arena game very well. We in New Orleans, in fact, had him here for only 1 year before Sam Weish called him to join his staff in '92 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So he really got around well. Now, also here in New Orleans, we mentioned all those names. And, well, that year training camp, I believe, started July the 1st, 1967, out at Cal Western University in San Diego. That must have been a real nice atmosphere to have camp.
It was a real beautiful atmosphere, but it was tough because it was 2 days and it wasn't fast. Today's players, William, wouldn't even understand the number of 2-a-day practices that we went through was mind-boggling. In fact, our NFL Players Association, it was just in its infancy then, and it's really us guys in the 1960s that established the NFLPA worked to get the 2-a-day practices down to what they have today, worked to get a lot of stuff that the players today enjoy. But I think we had practices, we had July, the entire month of July, we had part of August. During preseason, we had 2-a-day practices.
Wow.
It was unbelievable.
Well, now, Jackie,
weather out there, but it was really long, hard practice.
Well, Jackie Burkett had told me the one thing he'll always remember about that first camp was that it seems like they must have had 1 million guys go through that first camp.
Unbelievable number of people. I mean, in fact, we had so many people there, we didn't have enough room to have to hang their equipment. And we had a player that was drafted in the 17th round, and they pounded a nail into the wall next to my locker in the veteran locker room, and the player's name was Danny Abramowitz. And they hung his stuff up there because they told me, don't worry, he's not going to be here long. He's a 17th round pick, and we're just going to just put his stuff here. Well, you know, the rest is history. And Danny stayed, even though he got hurt, and they cut him, and he got his mouth knocked in, and his teeth all messed up, and went to the dentist and came back and practiced in the afternoon, and they had cut him, and he wouldn't leave. But anyway, to answer your question, yes, we had a lot of players. And in fact, Danny not leaving really showed a lot of his veterans, you know, look at this kid coming in 17th round, look at the heart that he has. And it really inspired some of those guys to say, hey, you know, maybe it isn't that tough, but this kid can hang in and do it.
Well, you know, Danny had mentioned that story so many times, and what ended up happening, he stays on the team through special teams, and by midway through the 67 regular season, winds up becoming a starter. And as the great man once said, the rest became history.
Oh yeah, I mean, everything's true. What Danny tells you about this story. I was in the locker next to his, and I thought he'd be gone, but no, you know, and we still laugh about it. You know, I haven't seen Danny in a few years, but we still laugh about it whenever I see him.
I always remember him saying that he always would make a joke about how many agents were after him when he got out of college. And his contract with the Saints that first year was $17,000 a year, and the signing bonus was $3,500 and a brand new color TV set.
That's right. Back then, I mean, we didn't have agents. If you had an agent and you were drafted and you had an agent, I mean, it was not popular to have an agent, because if you had one, the possibility of you signing was real minimal, or for signing for anything was even, you know, tougher, because it just wasn't done in those days.
Now, in that camp, if I've heard certain people tell the story right, you go in there and a handful of quarterbacks were there. Gary Quazzo, I believe, was acquired from the trade with Baltimore. Gary Wood from the New York Giants, who I'm sure you knew pretty well.
Sure.
And then this fella from San Francisco that some people cast off because he was involved in a car accident and had to rehab, a fellow by the name of Billy Kilmer.
Right.
And I take it, Billy Kilmer, it seemed like, from the stories, including that Ed Kaya had told, was that he just really worked hard that camp to work his way up to eventually be number one on opening day.
Yeah, Billy was just tremendous. I mean, talk about heart. And Gary Wood and Gary Clauser were also great guys, but Billy had a lot of natural talent, and since he had the accident, he didn't have the speed that he had before, but he just worked his tail off and just worked himself in the starting lineup. And I can remember the Saints played up in, we played up in either Seattle or Portland, I can't remember, but we were playing the 49ers, and they really made some insulting remarks against Billy, and it really upset him. And Billy was not an vindictive guy. He's the guy, the heart is the biggest goal. And a lot of us veteran guys really, stuck behind him. And I think we ended up winning the game because our first year, I think we were like 5-1 during preseason, but then during the regular season, it didn't do too hot. But Billy is a wonderful person.
And then, and he proved himself well, and and then another gentleman that came in a trade where they gave up a number one pick, a future pick in '68 to Green Bay for Jim Taylor. Now, his presence must have been something.
Oh, Jimmy was just another legend. I mean, we couldn't believe that Jimmy Taylor was there at the Saints. And in fact, Taylor was there and also Horning. And Paul didn't play at all. I think Paul retired about halfway through the preseason. But Jimmy was in great shape. In fact, probably today he's in great shape. And legendary player. I mean, Jimmy Taylor. What else? When you say his name, you just say legendary football.
Dave Witzel came in from Chicago, and in 1967 winds up becoming the UPI Comeback Player of the Year with 10 interceptions. And, of course, he had many nicknames, including the Weasel and I think the Great Thief, and wound up going to the Pro Bowl as a result in that '67 season.
Yeah, it's really deserved because Dave was just a big-hearted guy. In fact, that '67 team, we had a lot of cast-off players, but one thing that we didn't have quitters. We didn't have quitters. In fact, and we had people that stuck up for each other and protected each other because we had teams. This is the 1960s, right? We had teams taking cheap shots at our quarterbacks and at different running backs and receivers, and so we had people that really stepped up and just stopped it from happening whenever we could.
In fact, I do have on film from Game 2 of the regular season, which was against the Washington Redskins at Tulane Stadium, there was a play where Billy Kilmer rolled out to the right, had about a step and a half out of bounds when Sam Huff hit him late. And then that forced Billy Kilmer into the back bench or back tables where they kept the water. Dave Witzel got so mad he ran over and started punching on Sam Huff.
Yeah, I mean, these things happen. You don't see that nowadays. But the players back then really tried to protect each other. They really did.
And now, at preseason, you had that long training camp and then the 6 weeks of preseason. Now, tell me, I'm trying to remember if it was probably in the 60s, but didn't at one time the Saints also had some kind of camp facility on the North Shore at St. Paul's School?
Well, after training camp out in the West Coast, we would come back, and we had, at least that first year, we had a camp over there. We had so many camps that first year. It's like endless two-day session, but we went over there. The one thing that I remember about that camp over in the North Shore is that they had the greatest shrimp boil. Just laid out the food for us. And but there was a camp over there, but I can't recall much about it. Oh, I made a mistake. There's a player today that plays like a 1960s player, and that's his name's Kyle Turley. But I met Kyle a couple of years ago. But anyway, that's a guy that really stands in there and really sticks up for his teammates because I tell you, folks, if you get hit by one of these guys nowadays, they're so much bigger than when I was playing. If you get hit by him, you could really get hurt.
Very true. Also, one interesting story out of that original season, which I was told by different people later what happened. The Saints came in, of course. They got their franchise November 1, '66. John Meekum was given the rights to buy the team on December 15, '66. And the gentleman who would end up being the first general manager was Bert Rose, correct?
That's right.
Now, did you have any, how did you consider him as a GM?
We didn't know him that well, coming in from the Giants. I just didn't know him. The person that I had dealt with mostly was Vic Schwenk. But it was really odd to come into a brand new team and all of a sudden you have a brand new GM within, 30, 45 days.
Right. What had happened, for all the listeners as well, when John Meekum got the rights to buy the Saints, Commissioner Pete Rozelle actually asked for a favor of John Meekum and asked him if he would hire Burt Rose to be the GM. And at the time, Burt Rose was working in the NFL front offices, and John Meekum asked him, was there any particular reason why? And Pete Rozelle admitted that Burt Rose had some problems away from the office that was kind of hurting him. And so what John Meekum did, he agreed to hire Burt Rose, but not until the rest of the office was put together, including Vic Schwank, Henry Lee Parker, all those folks. And what ended up happening, the reason why Burt Rose was named GM right before it started training camp is to make his workload easier. So for the entire season, Mr. Rose basically sat at the offices and did sparing jobs until the season ended, and then I believe he moved on to Dallas afterwards.
I didn't know that. I did come in contact with John Meekum a lot, even after the playing days, because I went into business there in New Orleans and handled a lot of the Saints business. John Meekum, Jr. and Senior, were really gentlemen and really enjoyed working with them.
Now we finally get to big day, September 17th, 1967. Opening day at Tulane Stadium, where you had some 83,000 plus people in that place. Saints wound up winning the toss to receive the ball from, I guess back then the kicker for the Rams was Bruce Gossett. And he kicks the ball off, and here's this rookie from South Carolina State named John Riley Gilliam. He takes that ball, runs 94 yards for a touchdown, and I take it was probably like as if y'all just won the Super Bowl.
I know. We looked at each other. I was standing there on the sideline because I wasn't on the kickoff return team, and I'm standing there on the sideline, and we're looking at each other. We're going nuts. Gilliam ran this thing back against the Rams, and the place went nuts.
Here's a franchise now that starts off on such an incredibly high note, and then the rest of the year just never quite panned out. I believe it was 3-11 that first year, but I take it those fans that day and that game especially, that just meant one heck of a place to be in.
It was a great place to be. For those fans that are listening that were there, or that have relatives that were there to any of those 1967 games or the preseason games when Jimmy Taylor was introduced there in Tulane Stadium, almost at Tiger Stadium, Tulane Stadium on Willow Street. When Jimmy was introduced, you have 83,000 screaming people. I mean, the NFL, as great as it is today, will never have experiences like that again. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Now then, the season goes along. The one thing I had to talk about was week 4, October 8th. You had to go back to Yankee Stadium to face your old team, the Giants.
Oh, that was a bitter trip for me to make. Oh, yeah.
Now, that game, it's, I don't have the score with me, but I know the Giants had won. And then during the game, one of the most famous, or shall we say folklored events in team history was where during the game, wide receiver Tom Hall, had, of course, who was obtained from the Vikings, he went out for a pass and I believe got hit on the sidelines by Giant center Greg Larson. And Steve Stonebreaker, who was, of course, on the other sideline for the Saints, ran over to see if Tom was all right. And allegedly, him and Larson kind of sling words at one another and putting each other on notice. And then when the game was over, probably one of the most famous fights in team history broke out after that game.
I know. In fact, it's a fight that the NFL will not publicize or even talk about. The fight, I was standing there with Father Jarrow, who was the team chaplain, and Stoney's there because we're all the guys on defense standing there, and Stoney, and the game's over. The game's going to be over. The clock's coming down, and Father Jarrow says, "Steve, don't go over there." And Stoney, was heading for Larson, and so I was next to Steve, Doug Atkins, Steve, John. In fact, John Meekum was on the field, and so Steve took off across the field, and he decked Greg Larson, and a fight broke out on the whole field. I mean, picture this: Yankee Stadium back in those days, fans could step over and be on the field immediately. It was just like a 2 or 3 foot high fence, and they could be on the field. So you had the field full of fans, and you had 2 teams fighting, and it was really. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like a street fight like you see on one of these TV shows nowadays, but it was 2 NFL teams fighting.
Now I had read the Times-Picayune version of the story, And later, Buddy Diliberto wrote in his column, he called, I think it was titled Stonebreaker, a Hero in Saints Country. I read the New York Times version, and they wrote it totally different. They said basically and tried to paint us all as villains because we were a first-year team. But did you get part of? Were you involved in fisticuffs as well?
Yeah, I was. I ended up on the close to the Giants bench, and I was on the ground, and some of the players saw it was me, and they started laughing. And I look around, and Doug Atkins and Dave Rowe and Mike Tillman are there. You know, Doug is 6'8", Dave is 6'8", and Mike is 6'6", and they all weigh like 290. I mean, they were gigantic guys. I'm only a 255 guy, right? And so they were throwing players around. And so I got up and headed to the dugout. And by the time I got to the dugout, the fight had stopped. But the following night, Al Hurt was on Johnny Carson. See, people back then, Tonight Show was filmed in New York City, and Johnny lived over in 46th Street. And so Al Hurt was up on the show talking about Steve and the Saints, and they were really giving it to Jumbo because, you know, the Saints, this upstart team from down in New Orleans way, come up to big New York, and then the fight breaks out. So they really gave Al Hurt a lot of heat. Yeah, and they're kidding him and all that. But yeah, it was quite an event.
Now, I remember Stonebreaker in 1989, when we had the first New Orleans Saints Fan Festival. They had a special alumni gathering, and Stoney got up to speak, and he talked about the fight. He said that Danny Abramowitz suffered the worst injury because what happened with him, he said that Danny was trying to run away from the field when it started, and he didn't have his helmet on, and he ran so fast, because I believe back then you had to walk into the Yankee dugout to go to the locker room, that Danny ran so fast without his helmet on, when he took the first step, his momentum carried him into the roof of the Yankee dugout, and he cut his head wide open.
I didn't even know that.
So Danny Abramowitz wound up taking the worst blow, and nobody even hit him. But I do know our buddy Billy Kilmer said a few years ago that shortly after the fight started, Fran Tarkenton ran over to him, who was traded to the Giants in '67, and told him that, Billy, we need to get this stopped because you got weirdos running out on this field. Some of them may be carrying knives.
Yeah, because when I was with the Giants in '66, we had a terrible season, and us players, if we weren't on the field playing, we would get around our coach and we would escort him off the field like a huddle and just kind of scooch him on down the sideline before the game was over because people were coming on the field with knives.
Wow.
Yeah. Back in '66, of course, it wouldn't happen today, or I hope it wouldn't happen today, but yeah, you get some crazies out there.
Well, as the season went along, the Saints, October 15th, played in the Cotton Bowl against Dallas on a cold, rainy day. Had a chance to win it near the end, but I think y'all were all the way down to the 2-yard line when Billy Kilmer missed a snap from Wendrowski. The ball fell on the ground and Dallas recovered. It's a team, an expansion team, obviously had its bumps in the road, and eventually when November 5th came around at Tulane Stadium, hosting the Philadelphia Eagles, and your ex-teammate from the Browns, Walter Flea Roberts, runs back the opening kickoff of that game for a touchdown. So that must have been kind of eerie how it probably paralleled what happened 7 weeks earlier.
Yeah, it really was, but let me if I could change topics for a second about the Eagles. Doug Atkins, for those of us out there who know who Doug was, he was a Hall of Fame. He is a Hall of Fame player. He was 6'8", 280 pounds, University of Tennessee, and he's a great guy and a reputation during his playing days as a real wild man, which he was. And Doug wouldn't get upset. As big and strong as he was, he wouldn't get upset and really focused on playing somebody, unless he had to really be motivated. So Tom Fears, we were playing the Eagles up in Philadelphia, and we had to win a game, and things were really rough. We had lost a couple games. I don't know when we played them in the season, but what Tom Fears did is that he went down to French Quarter, had one of these French Quarter newspapers print a story that Lane Howell, who was starting left tackle, number 79 for the Eagles, that Lane Howell said this and that and this and that about Doug, disrespecting him. Lane didn't say anything. So the French Quarter paper was printed, and Coach Fears put it on the bulletin board on Friday. He didn't want to put it on like Tuesday or Wednesday because he couldn't keep Doug motivated that entire time. He put it on the bulletin board Friday. Of course, the game is Sunday. Well, Doug saw the story, and he just started fuming. And so us guys said, okay, big guy, settle down. We'll be on the plane Saturday, and you'll be able to play against them Sunday, which he did. And to see, Doug was clean. He wasn't playing dirty against Lane, but Lane was 6'5", 280 pounds. And to see defensive end take an offensive tackle and get him going back and then picking him up and throwing him on top of the quarterback, Norm Snead, is just unreal.
Now, didn't you say also in that same game, was it Doug who got mad at Fred Hill on an extra point attempt?
Yeah, Freddie held him. Freddie played at Southern Cal. I knew Fred from the All-Star games. Freddie was like 6 feet, 185 pounds. And Fred is blocking Doug, and he can't, so he's holding him. And Doug looks down and says, "Hey, boy, quit holding me." And Freddie wouldn't do it. And after the play, then Doug chased him the length of the field through the end zone. I don't know the rest of the story. I don't know if Fred went up in the stands or whatever, but Doug wanted to wring his neck.
Wow.
I saw Fred after the game, and he was laughing. He says, "Oh, man, did I make a mistake? I held Doug Atkins." I said, "Freddie, don't do that."
Well, that happened 2 weeks after this other Philadelphia game, and Walter Flea Roberts winds up scoring 3 touchdowns that day in Tulane Stadium. Saints first ever win 31-24, and I take it we probably had even more excited fans in the stands that day.
We really did, and I was really happy for Walt because the following year when I was with the Rams, when Deacon came back and played, Deacon was really fast, and Deacon, for some reason, he was on a punt coverage, and he caught the Flea. Walt Roberts weighed maybe 155, 160 pounds. And he caught him from behind and picked him up, and today they would be a 15-yard penalty. And slammed him to the turf like he would like a rag doll, and gee, Walt was really hurting. So if you ever talk to him, ask him, did you still have pains from that time that Deacon slammed him to the turf out in the Coliseum?
Oh, well, that must have been pain.
Oh,
Then the last regular season game in Tulane Stadium was against the Atlanta Falcons, a game the Saints won near the end, less than 2 minutes to go. I think the Saints had to drive almost 90 yards. Less than 2 minutes ago, Billy Kilmer eventually winds up hitting, I think it was Kent Kramer for the winning score. Gave the team, at that point, it would have been the second victory of the year. And, guys, I tell you what, that's the one thing about that Saints team. Many people will forget because of the success the Carolina Panthers had in 95. But in 67, the Saints win 3 regular season games, and for a very long time, that stood a record amongst expansion teams in league history.
Oh, that's right. It really did. And I'm just happy to have been part of that 67 team because, how many teams can you play on there and be a member of their first team? I'm just really honored to have been there. It was great.
Now, the last game of the year was in Washington, very cold day up there, if my history was right. Game the Saints won pretty resoundingly. Now, wasn't it a true story that when everybody got back to New Orleans after that game, Al Hurd had a huge party for the team at his club in the French Quarter?
Al had a lot of parties for the team in the French Quarter, and yeah, that was the one. Oh boy, bringing up some good memories. Right, he sure did. He sure did.
Wow. Now, like I said, and then after your 1-year Saint career here, you went to the Falcons and then came back, and what was it, for some 18 years you served as the Saints official travel agent?
Yeah, from about 1969, I went to work for a travel agency, and then I did that to 1989, so almost 20 years. And what it did is that not only did my agency have the privilege of handling all the travel arrangements for them, but because we're still connected to the team, and we had access to players, and we ended up having trips to the Saints out-of-town games, which led to also having trips for Tiger football games and Tulane football games. But we had a lot of Tiger football game trips, and I was working I had my travel agency, but I did a lot of my work in the offshore industry all throughout South Louisiana, Thibodaux, Houma, Morgan City, Berwick, Patterson, Bayou Lafourche, Terrebonne Parish, everywhere, and we had a tremendous success with Saints fans and Tiger fans making road trips, because that's the years before cable TV, before ESPN. So we had some great times.
Now, I take it you, one thing I wanted to talk about. I knew it was something I had mentioned the other night about members of the media who covered the team when you played, and of course after you stayed with the travel agency. One name I want to throw out is Wayne Mack. What are your memories of him?
Oh, Wayne, what a wonderful guy. I really miss him. He was just down-to-earth guy, a real knowledge, real gentleman, and a good-time person, and just a pleasure to be around.
And then, of course, for a very long time at Channel 4 television, there was good old Hap Glaude.
Oh, Hap. Oh, what can you say about Hap? I mean, Hap is another legend, one of the great people. Hap Glaude, people like this, William, Hap Glaude, Wayne Mack, just wonderful people.
Now, of course, almost, I won't say polar opposite, but I'm sure it was pretty interesting in those days when our friend Buddy Diliberto had some interesting comments that I'm sure John Meekum didn't like from time to time.
I know, Buddy, that's when it all started back then, and Buddy, I really felt for him because he was so frustrated. He was trying to get some things accomplished, and he couldn't do it, and he just started criticizing the organization so much, and all of us know what the rest is. But Buddy's been here a long time, and he's done some real good broadcasting, and I know that he could probably talk hours and hours about all this, or days and days, in fact.
Well, I do know through Doug Atkins, of all people, in 1968, apparently Doug didn't like something Buddy had said. So during an away trip, while they were in the air going to their away game, Doug Atkins went over to Buddy Diliberto and grabbed him and threatened to throw him out of the plane at 20,000 feet.
You must have the right story, because I was gone by then, but one thing you didn't want to do is to get Doug upset.
But
Buddy did, shame on him.
And then in 1971, that was the year Buddy wound up getting banned from the team plane for life. And John Meekum didn't like something he had said, and I really don't remember what it was for, and Buddy gets a call from John Meekum's personal assistant, Fred Williams. And Fred told him on the phone that, congratulations, you've have been banned for life from the team plane for life plus 10 years, which means if you're the second Lazarus and come back to life, you're still off for 10.
So we can look at it now, and I can laugh, and I hated to see the arguing going on, because John Meekum is a wonderful person, and did a lot. I mean, he brought the franchise, brought NFL football to the New Orleans region and the whole South Louisiana area, and Buddy just had this thing, and back in those days, players said things, sportscasters said things. I was friends with Butkus, and Butkus ended up doing the color for Wayne Mack's show, the Saints broadcast. And so when Dick would come in town, he'd call me, and so I would go out with Dick in the French Quarter on Saturday nights and try to keep him civil so that he could do the game on Sunday. So I accomplished it most of the time, but a couple times I just couldn't do it. But back in those days, it was real different. People weren't really politically correct. You said what you were thinking, and took the criticism afterwards.
It's a shame, though, it did take 21 seasons before they finally had that winning season and the playoff appearances under Jim Mora, and I take it, I'm sure yourself included, that must have been one heck of a relief when it finally came.
Yeah, Jim really is a tremendous coach, and he really, I really like him, and I was sorry that the relationship ended like it did, but that's business, and things happen like that. But I was so happy for him, and for the Saints, and for the Saints fans, and for everybody associated with them, for them to have success like that.
Well, just so many memories along the years, and so many players that were with us in '67, and it's good to know players like yourself, Jim, have kept those memories really good, and hopefully as we continue with this series, we'll be able to tell a lot more fun stories to all our listeners.
Well, I just want to tell the listeners out there, I really love Louisiana. I'm saying it like a Yankee now, Louisiana. It's supposed to be Louisiana. But I really want to say hello